They're doing a big loop, say quarter of a mile out there, and they're starting to about a half circle back towards me, and then I'm yelling and screaming at the dogs to turn around and look the right way.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast, brought to you in part by the fine folks at Marshall Radio, the makers of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking system available. For more information on their products, including the awesome GPS system, head to marshallradio.com, and also by the Falconry Fund. And the Falconry Fund is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to supporting and protecting the various arts and practices of falconry and the cultural and environmental assets that make it possible. For more information on the Falconry Fund and the different projects that they have going on and to donate, just head to falconryfund.org. And what you just heard was a little bit of a teaser for one of the really cool stories that you'll hear towards the end of this podcast, which is the third podcast in the New Mexico Falconer Association series. And this episode is with Greg Rabourn. And I found this episode to be especially cool because he is one of the falconers that dirt hawks jackrabbits with falcons, and this is a particular topic that we did discuss more in this episode, and has been something that I've been pretty interested in for a while, and kind of a little bit of a fantasy for me at the moment because of where I live, and who knows, I'll probably never get a chance to practice this aspect of falconry myself, but you never know. Regardless, it was nice hearing more information about it, and it's definitely got me intrigued and looking forward to seeing it for myself at some point. But without any further ado, I think we're going to jump right into this third episode in this New Mexico Falconer Association series, and I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. So I've got a few more of these for you all, and looking forward to delivering them to you over the next month and a half here. So without further ado, we will jump into this episode now with Greg Rabourn. Thank you, Greg, for joining us, and appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to do this along with your other New Mexico fellow falconers. And like I said, I appreciate you coming up and making the drive, and so we were just talking a bit ago. What exactly started you off in all this? Where did you start? Where did you live initially before you came to New Mexico?
So I lived in New Jersey, and when I was 14 years old, we moved out to Albuquerque. And my dad was a Westerner. He was born in Kansas, and so was I. And he was just dying to get off the East Coast and get out west. And man, when we came into Albuquerque, it was just, I thought, oh, this is the coolest place ever. I just loved it immediately. The scenery, the open spaces, and I could get out and walk around and hike and hunt, and so I just loved New Mexico from the very beginning. And I guess my interest in falconry really started with interest in birds of prey. I didn't know about falconry. And anytime National Geographic came on, Walt Disney, if there anything to do with birds of prey, I was on it. And I was watching it, and I just absorbed everything I could. And then I think I was about 16 in high school, and a kid came and he brought a raptor in. I think it was a marsh hawk. And he did a, show and tell. We were in high school. And that's when I found out, about falconry and a little bit. So, I was interested in hunting, and plus the fact that you could hunt with birds of prey just seemed like the coolest thing ever. So, by the time I was old enough to build a muse and have a place where I could get the bird set up, I did it. So that was about 1978. And of course, like everybody else, started off with a red tail, or almost everybody else, and flew a couple red tails without much success, and really didn't have much help. I lived up in the Four Corners then. We moved up to Farmington, and there were no falconers up there. But I found out about the New Mexico Falconers Association, so I'd come down to the annual meeting and get to know some guys, and then, things progressed from there. I'd go attend our meets, and back then in the 80s and early 90s, there were more opportunities for duck hawking. Back then the ranchers had stock tanks and where there were ducks, and so we go down to Hatch and Silver City, and I'd watch these guys fly their birds, and that's when I said, okay, maybe I haven't been successful so far, but I can be. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. So you're one of the guys then that kind of started off before there was much in the ways of regs and all that kind of stuff, or did you start off right after those got implemented? Or
right after they got implemented, I think. I know that one of my mentors was Jim Skidmore. He showed me how to fly a long wing and taught me his methods. And he had one of the last passage peregrines that were taken before the regulations were implemented. And so I guess after my red tails, I was able to get an IS Jersey goshawk, and that bird made me into a falconer. So somehow I couldn't make a red tail click, but that Jersey goshawk and I got it together, and I had a real successful hunting experience with that bird. We were able to take all the quarry that you would expect with a goshawk.
Well, I imagine it's probably easier. I mean, with being such wide open, I'm sure back then with there being more game, either long wings or accipiters probably would be better in this state. I would imagine, just because the lack of trees and stuff that you normally need a red tail to. Well, not necessarily that you can't hunt a red tail off the glove or whatever, but it's they shine their most when there's trees and
right.
stuff, at least in my opinion. But
right, you can get some height, and so yeah, with that little goshawk, Jeff Turner got me that bird. It was a Silver City goshawk, and which is what's the right word for those birds? Apache goshawk. And he was small, but I took pheasants and ducks and magpies and crows, rabbits, pigeons, everything you put in his way, he'd take a good shot at it. And so I was hooked in.
Cool. So, I mean, have you pretty much enjoyed flying long wings or accipiters since then, or have you had a preference or flown both? Or
well, after that male goss, and I got him as a very small downy. I raised him up, completely, and so he was just all my bird. No one had anything else to do with it. I got after he passed, I got a couple of secondhand female goshawks, and they weren't as exceptional as he was. They were still good, and but then I was ready to move on to long wings. You know, as I said, I come down and watch the guys fly them down here, and I fly ducks, and I was just, man, I got to do that. And about that time, we discovered an area that we could fly in the Four Corners. We had ponds and open country, and so now I had the opportunity, and I had the quarry. So I started flying long wings, and first bird I got was a Peregrine Prairie hybrid, and I think I bought him for $900. And I put my order in for a Peregrine, and at the last minute, the guy said, "Well, sorry, you're, not the top of the list, and this is the bird I have for you." And so, okay, that sounds good. And he was good. That was a bird that was I was able to train to go up relatively easily, and I trained it the way that Jim Skidmore taught me, which was with bag quarry to get him started, chuckers and pheasants, pigeons. And that bird, her name was Cloud. And I named her Cloud because she was in the clouds, and I was so impressed with her. So she was a thermal flying bird, and I remember that, if you're going to set up your bagged quarry and all your stuff, you better have it set up and ready when you turn this bird loose, because she would be up there fast. Mm-hmm. She was a thermal rider. And so I learned, when to fly, and late mornings, and when we could catch the thermals. And so I learned a lot from that bird. Lost her due to a telemetry malfunction. That was really disappointing because, the story is I turned on the transmitter, and my receiver, I got a beep. Mm-hmm. So I'm good. Well, she flew off, and then I have no signal. I found out, a few days later or a week later that I had a bad connection to my antenna. So up close, you have a signal, the bird's out there, you don't. So unfortunately, I lost her like that.
Bummer.
Yeah. And so, like I say, I really enjoyed her, and then I've just been so lucky in my falconry career of people giving me birds.
How's that feel?
Well, it feels great,
It must.
And so one of my best friends, falconer friends, and from Farmington, he moved to San Diego, and while he was there, he bought a falcon, and the city was closing in on him, and he called me up and said, "Hey, Greg, I'm just scared I'm going to lose this bird. She flies big, and my fields aren't big enough. You want her?" And so I said, "Yeah, heck yeah, I want her." So I got a female falcon, and she was an imprint, and just the sweetest bird you've ever had. And to this day, I'm a falcon man through and through. I love falcons.
Yep. Do you have any issues keeping falcons down here?
Well, the heat, hasn't really been an issue. I mean, it is a bit of an issue, but it's not something that stops your success. Disease, has been my biggest problem with falcons. They have very little resistance, and they get sick. You have 3 days or 4 days to get it fixed, or they die. And so
yeah, I know they're real prone to Asper and stuff, right?
Yeah, prone to asper. They don't have resistance to anything practically. So, but anyway, I really enjoy gerfalcons. So, I don't think they're they're not as good at duckhawks as peregrines or peregrine hybrids. But I have had them that fly just as high, and you know, we're very excellent duckhawks.
So how many years were you in falconry before you actually started flying your first year then, and really just took to the long wing craze?
Quite a while. I mean, I had my permit. So I'd say 6-7 years from the time I got my permit to where I started flying long wings. And anyway, then so that gerfalcon that I started flying her at ducks, and she was kind of a slow learner. It took us all season till she was, I would say she was a made duck hawk, but she was at the end of the season. And I went to a lot of lengths to try to get her started. I bought bag mallards, I had, they're flighted mallards that you could buy. And I was always very careful to be sneaky about throwing those out, so she didn't know that they were coming from me. So, early on in the season, she thought she was killing ducks, but she wasn't getting the wild ones,
Yeah.
And one of the things I've noticed about gerfalcons and ducks is that a gerfalcon, when it sees quarry, flush, they're instantaneous after it. Where a good made peregrine or peregrine hybrid can say, I'm going to wait a little bit for these ducks to clear this lake, because I know if I go down now, it's going to go back in the water.
Yeah.
Where I found my experience with the gerfalcons is they can't wait. Flushes, they're on it. Now, there's some circumstances when that's great. A lot of circumstances where that's great. But on big water, that first bird had a hard time figuring that out, and it took her a while. So, she was, that bird was just the sweetest, just like a puppy dog, as tame as a puppy dog. And she laid eggs for me, and she was really just an enjoyable bird to have around. No screaming, no mantling. They're easy. That's one of the things I like about gerfalcons is you can get an imprint and make it into a well-mannered bird without a lot of trouble. Just a little bit of common sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, imprinting's another one of those things, though, don't you think? That it's just that the opinions on them are just the whole process is just so susceptible from, or it's all a matter of perception, and it varies so differently from falconer to falconer.
Right.
And I'll be the first person to admit that I'm not. That's not really a process that's for me. I think you're either so pro for it or so pro against it, and there's not very much middle ground. But I don't know. Is that what you found just talking to the other guys?
Well, I think that's true with a lot of people. It's not true with me. I see the benefits of both birds, or a passage, or a chamber bird, or an imprint. But I do think that gerfalcons are easier to make a well-mannered imprint than the others. Peregrines are difficult, and goshawks, they're going to scream every time you get an imprint. I haven't seen anybody that has an imprint goshawk that doesn't scream somewhat, and mine did. But then my same friend, Mike Photo, still my friend, calls me up. I still have this gerfalcon. Her name was Dancer. And he says, Greg, I got a beautiful peregrine female. You want to fly her for me? Sure. And he'd started this bird, and Mike, the way he trains his long wings is pretty wild and free. He lets them go, and just lets them go. He lets them fly around and learn how to, catch thermals, and he's not one of these guys that pulls out the lure when he sees that bird disappear from sight. So he does a good job getting them started. And so when I got this bird, it was already flying high, but he didn't have the quarry for it, or he didn't have the quarry in a place that he felt safe to fly. So she was a really aggressive, once she learned the trade of duck hawking, really aggressive, really tactical bird. And she was just a dominating force. You put her up over a pond and those ducks better act like they're scared. They take off. Geese, didn't matter. Geese would take off and just fly away like, oh, I'm not afraid of you. He says, nah, it's not going to stand. You're going to be afraid here in a second.
Yeah.
And she would go down and she would knock those geese down. She didn't take very many, but she wouldn't let them get away with flying under her. Nothing's going to fly under her. That's any type of quarry.
Yeah.
And she was just a high-flying, like I say, just dominating bird. Didn't matter if it's big water. I could put her up on a big, a fairly big pond or small lake, and you could just pull out your easy chair and sit there and watch for 45 minutes or an hour while she flew those birds. Because on big water, at that time we had some places where the ducks were just coming in and going, even if there is a falcon in the air, because the water was big and I can sneak past this. Besides that, there's 100 other ducks in the air, and they weren't personally so, it's like, I'm not the only duck here, so I can make it. So I'd have these great flights that would go on for, like I say, quite some time, and I could just sit back and watch. Didn't have to flush. Just sit there with the binoculars and watch her go.
Well, that's cool.
To me, that was like the best falconry I've ever had.
Well, and so, do you prefer, still to this day, do you prefer hybrids over just straight gears? Or, do you think that there's a big contrast in the imprinting process, at least from your point of view or your opinion, that's different? Or do you think that pretty much most of these birds that have any kind of gear in it are easier to imprint like a full gear? Or do you think it's completely different? Or
well, I guess I'm not sure about that. I think the full gears are easier to imprint. It's easier to have a well-mannered imprint with a full gyr falcon. Now, it depends on. I think you asked me what if I preferred pure gyrs or gyr hybrids. It depends on what I'm doing.
Right.
So, if I'm flying hares or jackrabbits, which is what I do now, there's not a lot of difference between a pure gyr and a gyr saker, or a gyr prairie. They're all big enough, strong enough. The females, for sure, are all big enough, strong enough to do the job. And they all, have the instinct to go for them. I haven't had much trouble trying to enter that type of bird on the jackrabbits. And so anyway, that's my opinion, is that for hares, I'd love to have gerfalcon I like to have a pure or a partial or a hybrid gerfalcon.
I can understand that, mainly because the size.
Size.
Yeah, the size would be key for that, especially if you're on jackrabbits, for sure.
Yeah.
But no, I was just, like I said, I'm not, and just to be clear, I'm not, saying that, once again, anybody should, have a necessarily one opinion versus the other as far as what to do and how to imprint or anything like that. I'm just curious because that's a different point of view that I've heard before. I've not really heard many guys say, well, or make a statement before that full pure jeers are easier to imprint versus other types of birds, or why. So well, what do you think is exactly about their personality that makes them easier to do that with?
I don't know. Maybe because they got a bigger brain. They're smart, and but I don't know. I think they're just. I don't know why they're easier, really, other than intelligence. And the crazy thing is that there's so much difference between an imprint gerfalcon and a passage or a chamber. A chamber gerfalcon is a nervous bird, and they'll you have to treat them like a wild bird, and the imprints just tame down so much that they're really for me, they're a joy to be around. Both of them are, but as far as, if you're flying ducks or grouse, you're better, in my opinion, you're better off to have a peregrine or a peregrine hybrid. It'll be easier.
That makes sense.
You can still do it with a pure gerfalcon. Plenty of people have, and I have, but I think your odds of success are better when you've got that peregrine blood in there. They just go up naturally.
I've heard that from multiple people also. But
yeah.
So I mean, you're not really doing waterfowl quite as much. Then you're doing more jackrabbits.
No. So when I moved from the Four Corners, Farmington area to Albuquerque, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, the duck hawking here in Albuquerque is not good. Mm-hmm. And there's practically no pheasants in hawkable areas. So I'm a long winger, and I'm wondering what I'm going to do now. And, I could go back. I could get a goshawk. I like goshawks. Harris hawks don't do it for me. I've never had one, never will. And, but anyway, so I get here to Albuquerque, and I go to the meeting, and I meet my now good friend, then I didn't know him, was Terrence Wright. And Terrence, he's alias the Dirt Winger. And I got to know him, and he told me that, hey, I'm running coursing hounds and falcons on jackrabbits. And he said, you want to go check it out? And I said, yeah, I'd love to go check it out. Because as a little boy, my dad lived in Kansas, and he would tell me stories about coursing coyotes with greyhounds and wolfhounds and, coursing dogs. So, that always interested me. Never seen it, never been around a greyhound or Saluki before. So Terrence took me out and with his team, and right away I said, yeah, this is cool. I love the dogs because they're mellow, they're calm. but when it's time to go to work, they're on it, And he didn't, I was kind of shocked. Well, what happens when the falcon catches it and the dogs get there? It looks like conflict to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, the dogs learn to let the falcon have the rabbit, And so I went out with Terrence for a season and watched him and just loved it. Like I said, I love the dogs. I love to watch the falcons. And at that time, I think Terrence had a male Jura peregrine and not a large bird. And he was taking game with that small falcon, 700-800 grams. Not small, but for jackrabbits it's small. And so I got on the horn and ordered myself a Jersaker from Danny Ertzgard, Pacific Northwest Falcons, and he sent me a white Jersaker, and that bird was fairly easy to get started. I didn't know if it was going to be hard to do or what, but I also, of course, I got the falcon, then I got a couple of coursing hounds. One was like a stag hound, which is a mix of greyhound, wolfhound, or deerhound. He looked like a greyhound, but you don't really know exactly what they are. And these dogs are common in the West, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. They have these stag hounds, and they're usually used for coyotes. So, fairly easy to come by in these parts. So I got one of those, and then Stephen Bodio, the author and Falconer, at that time came back from the Middle East, Kazakhstan, and he brought Tazis with him. So he was raising Tazis. So I went down there to Magdalena where he lived and met Steve and picked up the Tazi pup from him. So I had a Tazi and a little stag hound, and the new Jersaker, and it wasn't that difficult for me to get things going and to be successful with my first team, with Terrence's help.
That's neat. I haven't really gotten a chance to talk to too many guys that are doing large falcons on rabbits before. So this is pretty interesting to me because honestly, I love long wings, and I'm a big long wing fan, obviously, but where I'm at isn't super conducive to long wings. It could be done, but it would be a lot harder, and you wouldn't get near as many head of game. But I've always been interested to hear. I've heard of some people trying, for example, like prairies on cottontails, or like what you're doing, jeers on jackrabbits and things like that. But I've not really heard too much about the process, or how, like, what the flight style's like. Like if it's really important to have a team, with dog and falcon, or if it can be done with just the falcon, or whatever the case may be. So weigh in on that some, because I really want to learn more about this.
One of the things that a lot of people don't understand is why you need the dogs. And the reason is because when a jackrabbit sees a large falcon chasing it, first thing it wants to do is hide. And so without the dogs, you don't get a good flight. You get a jackrabbit that's running slow, running in the bush, running in the cholla cactus. The falcon never gets up to speed, and that's why people say, well, why would you hunt rabbits with a falcon? Because that's what happens. Now, when you put the dog or dogs in the mix, that jackrabbit is forced to run as fast as he can because, a greyhound or a saluki or a staghound or a coursing hound can catch him by himself. And so that jackrabbit has to run as fast as it can to get away from those dogs. And now you have a high-speed quarry that's motivated to run for his life as fast as he can. And so now you've got quarry that's running 35, 40 miles an hour, and you get a flight suitable to a falcon, in my opinion. Typically, the way the falcon will fly a hare is you will have multiple stoops. So, typically, this is what I do. I walk out on the field. I want to get a field that's relatively open, relatively flat, with jackrabbits in it. It doesn't have to be, completely flat, or it doesn't have to be, there can be cover, but it needs to be fairly open. So the falcon has a chance to get a strike in on the jack. And so anyway, I'll walk along, I'll have my bird hooded usually, and on the fist, and the dog's out walking free looking for a jackrabbit. So walk along, jackrabbit breaks cover. The dogs are typically on it immediately if they see it. And then strike the hood. A made bird is just off the fist instantly, just like pulling the trigger. Sees that jack running, he is off. So the bird will, gain altitude, usually not very high, maybe 40, 50 feet. He'll put in his first stoop. Try to strike the rabbit or bind to it. If he misses, just throws up, does it again and again. So these flights can go a long ways.
I was getting ready to say that sounds like a lot of running. Yeah,
it's a lot of walking and it's a lot of running. And, if you can do it on horseback, that's the ultimate. That's the way to go. But I don't have a horse. I've done it on horseback several times, but I don't have a horse, so I'm out there on foot. But, so, the falcon will either, depending on how sharp it is, if you have a bird that's not too sharp, well, this flight can go on for 2 miles until he finally decides he wants to grab it. So that's motivation to get your bird a little bit right when you go out there. Sometimes the flight can go 200 yards, take them down, and the first stoop, and it's over. But usually you got a quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile flight. And you get to watch, the multiple stoops. And, to me, the perfect flight is when the falcon strikes the jackrabbit and he'll just roll them head over heels. The dogs run in behind it, they grab it, they kill it. The falcon binds to it, and the dogs back off. No fuss, no muss, no broken feathers. Just whack, and that's it.
Wow. In theory, that sounds amazing when it all goes right. I'm sure it's not unlike much else. There's always room for for error for sure. But
Oh yeah.
sounds to me like you need to be getting you an ATV or something.
Well, here's I'm thinking about going with an electric bicycle,
Okay, yeah,
mountain bike.
yeah, yeah. Those are becoming more popular.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. So my wife gave me the okie dokie, so I'm shopping for an electric bike. I'm gonna be able maybe if I can make that work, that'll be a little bit easier to keep up with things. And the other, one of the drawbacks of this flight is, at least in the Albuquerque area, is it's dangerous for the falcon, and the danger is the coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, other hawks and eagles, yes, but the coyotes are the real danger, especially around Albuquerque, because they're urban coyotes. They see people all the time.
Not afraid.
They're not afraid of you.
Yeah.
So, but the dogs offer protection. So if the dogs are there, the coyotes can't come in on they can't come in on the kill. But if the flight went 2 miles or 1.5 miles, well, that's going to take me 20 minutes to get there, 15 minutes. By then the dogs are rested up and they're coming back looking for me. They'll stay there for 10 or 15 minutes with the bird. But after that, they come looking for me. So that's the period of time that the bird's on its own, and so that's we've lost some birds that way, the coyotes here.
Yeah, I'm sure that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine, I don't know. Like, it would be tough making in for 15 to 20 minutes just to find a pile of feathers at the end of the road.
Yeah,
But
it's pretty tough. It's,
yeah.
So, but over the years, I've been able to shorten those flights by flying on the right ground and flying with a bird that's at the right weight and sharp, so that she's not just playing.
right.
Because that's the thing. Another thing about falcons that's not so good is they love to play. So they'll chase a jackrabbit. I don't care how fat they are. Once they're made to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now catching it, no. But I'll chase that thing all over the world. So anyway, I've made some progress on that, but still, that's one of the downfalls of the flight, is that there's that danger from predators. But I have really good dogs right now, and my male dog, he is just so loyal and so protective. He protects the bird, but really, in my opinion, what he's doing is even though the bird has the hair and is eating it, he still thinks it's his. He lays down by the bird. No other dog gets to come within 20 feet. So my other dog has to stay back 20 feet. If I have friends that come with me, sometimes I'll let a friend run his dog with my team. That dog learns pretty quick. You don't get close to the rabbit.
Dog dominant, huh?
Yeah. Old Ragnar will kick your ass. So he doesn't let red tail, any birds come in, raptors, coyotes, strange dogs. He protects it as long as he's there. So I'm really lucky to have that dog. And he's what's called a lurcher. A lurcher is a cross between a coursing hound and a working dog. Could be, working dogs are bird dogs, border collies. So this particular dog is a mix of staghound, and he's got a little bit of pointer, English pointer. and that pointer blood in him, he hunts differently than the straight coursing hounds. Straight coursing hound will walk along and he'll stop and he'll look, and they're called, another word for them is gaze hounds, because they stand there and they gaze out across the vista looking for something to run, to move, and they're very good at that. But a lot of times they'll just walk along with you, just looking, hoping a jackrabbit will jump up and they'll see it. Where Ragnar, the lurcher, he gets out and quarters back and forth like a pointer. So he runs and runs and just covers so much ground that he puts up more jackrabbits than the standard coursing hound does. So I was lucky to get that dog. I really wasn't. He was like the last choice. That's not what I want. I want just a pure coursing hound. Not necessarily a pure breed, but,
Yeah.
Saluki Greyhound, Saluki Tazi, something like that.
Yeah. It's nice when you get those pleasant surprises, either from a dog or a bird, and it's when you end up with a one of those diamonds in the rough that you would have never expected.
Right.
That's it's hard to replace those birds or dogs, and sometimes I've noticed that it's hard to not get more sentimental at times about those particular animals than the ones that you thought that you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But well, I mean, I'm glad that you shared some of that. I've always wondered about that whole process. I've heard people just kind of talk about it in passing, but I've never really had a chance to really hear it described. So thanks for sharing that. But I mean, at this point, I think this would be a good time for you to share one of your favorite stories about flight or previous bird or dog or combination, or something that sticks out in your mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something that I haven't mentioned yet is that you can fly a falcon from the waiting on position on jackrabbits.
Okay.
And the second bird I got was given to me by a gentleman that I didn't even know. And this bird was already trained to wait on. White jershaker, female, beautiful bird. And the guy was trying to do the flight that I was doing, and anyway, dog got hit by a train and got too busy at work and heard about me, gave me the bird. So anyway, I end up with this bird that waits on. And I'll tell you a flight that I really enjoyed with that bird. And that is Terrence and I were out in Las Lunas. We have a nice big wide open field there, and put the bird up. She circles and circles, and she wasn't super high. I'd say probably 600-700 feet, but a nice pitch. And we're walking along, and just perfectly the dogs bump a jackrabbit, and with the bird straight above. And as you can imagine, it was just a direct stoop with the bird pumping. This particular bird, her style was she'd do 3 wing beats, fold up her wings, 3 wing beats, fold up her wings, and just wasn't satisfied with just tucking them in. She wanted to go faster. So she'd put on the gas by flapping her wings while she's going down. And she just rolled that jackrabbit perfectly and never got up. So, and the dogs were right there. So that was, Terrence and I were slapping each other on the back for that one. That was a beauty.
it it always astounds me how these birds don't kill themselves with a strike, even just on waterfowl or grouse, whatever, flying quarry. It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit how they aren't just plummeting into the ground on something like a jackrabbit. I mean, that's amazing. It's something that it's now, after having this discussion, I feel like it's going to be a bucket list goal to see it sometime, because I want to see how these birds, I mean, obviously they're master flyers. They probably pull up at the last second. I mean, they have to, or else they just plummet right into the ground, duh. But I want to see it. Like, I want to see this now.
Well, good. I'm glad you're interested. I wish more people knew about it, because, it gives you the opportunity of like, well, gee, yeah, I'd love to have a big falcon, but what do I need a big falcon for?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a big falcon for 90% of falconry.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's an advantage. Now, you can do it with a prairie falcon. The bird the size of a prairie falcon, and particularly prairie falcons, they do it naturally. They kill jacks naturally. And prairie falcons are about the hardest striking bird I've ever seen. And Terrence has flown a couple of prairies, and I've seen his prairie falcons just headshot these jackrabbits, and they're just dead. They just roll over dead, and when they hit them. So you don't have to have a big falcon, but it's a good excuse to have one. You can put one to work. I love, I like big falcons.
Well, and if there's one thing in the world that falconers need more of, it's excuses, right?
Yeah.
It's all around.
Yeah, and if you don't have, like me, you don't have ducks, you don't have grouse, well, what are you going to do? What do you need a falcon for? Well, if you have jackrabbits, you've got quarry, if you like that flight. And I've had, these old grouse hawkers and long wingers. I tell them what I'm doing, and they give me that look like, well, but why?
Why not?
Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
And I tell them, well, if you saw it, you'd know why.
Yeah.
You haven't seen it, you don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So don't give me that look.
Oh, that's great.
Now I'll tell you a typical flight off the fist. I'll tell you a story about a good flight off the fist. So one time I was out with Jake and Cisco. That's the Tazi and the little black staghound, looks like a greyhound. And we're walking along, and this is late in the season. So all the dumb jacks are dead. And we're walking along, and instead of flushing it out in front, this one waits till we go by, about 15 yards, and shoots out the back.
Try to backdoor you, yeah.
Yep. So I spin around and unhood the bird, and I'm yelling ho ho, and the bird goes straight for it, but the dogs are going the wrong way. If when I yell ho ho and I scream it, the dogs get so excited sometimes they just run. They're just like, I'm pointed this way. I know there's a rabbit out there. So anyway, in this particular flight, the dogs are going the wrong way. The bird's hot on the trail. And finally, they're doing a big loop, say a quarter of a mile out there, and they're starting to about a half circle back towards me, and then I'm yelling and screaming at the dogs to turn around and look the right way. So they do. So now the falcon and the dog and the jackrabbit and the dogs are headed straight for each other.
Head on collision.
They're on a collision course. So things are happening quick. So the dog, my little black dog, he takes a bite at this jackrabbit going the opposite direction. Jackrabbit jumps up in the air, leaps over the dog, and is headed up right next to me. Now everything's right in front of me. Falcon goes zooming past, knocks it down, and jackrabbit gets back up, but it didn't make it more than like 10 yards, and the dogs were right there and caught it. So
Wow.
that was a lot of fun, that one. To see that jackrabbit jump right next to me over the dogs, I'm cheering for the jackrabbit now. It's like, go baby, go.
Well, I mean, you have to admire anything that just has that. I mean, because you got to know what's going through that jackrabbit's head at that point in time is just like, how can any higher power in this world hate me any more than humanly possible right now? I've got dogs headed towards me. I got a falcon at my back. Like, how could this be any worse for me right now?
Yeah, it's a bad day
Wow.
for the jackrabbit.
Well, I mean, at least that was probably your shortest retrieve that you probably ever had to do.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't have to run far for that one.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all that, and I think that's probably a really good note to just about end on, to be honest. Is there anything else that you want to give a shout out to, or any last bit of imparting wisdom or anything?
Yeah, I would say that if anybody's interested in this flight, I did an article in the journal last year, so you could read that article and learn a little bit more about it.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll have to read that too. I'm interested. So, very cool. Well, thank you again for making the trek out here, and for giving me almost an hour of your time now. I know it's an hour of your life that you'll never get back, but
You're sure welcome. I had plenty of fun doing it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.